So my focus now turns to trying to get the Christian proselytizer himself to make the case for religious skepticism. The two characters read through some of the stories and scriptures from non-Christian religions, and I try to get the Christian to spell out some of the strong clues that a religion was not created by omniscient wisdom, but just made up by people. Now, weeding out man's religion from God's might be an easier task if out of all the competing versions, one of them happened to, say, float in the air or emit some kind of magical glow, because then we could just point to the floating or the glowing one and say, well, clearly there's something supernatural going on with that one. But for better or worse, that's not the case. All of our so-called sacred scriptures look pretty much the same as all the other books that come off the printing press. So we have to find a way from these texts themselves to come up with some kind of test for holiness, or at the very least a test for lack of holiness. Now, in my book I go into some involved details, but for this video I'm just going to jump to the conclusion, which is that the Christian and I read through some of the scriptures and stories from non-Christian religions, and we both agree that the following three characteristics are strong clues that a religion is man-made. First, its stories reflect an inaccurate and earthbound perspective of the universe's layout. Second, it contains laws that are either barbaric or reflect senseless prejudices, or both. Third is we can look to its origins and see that, at least to a large extent, it was pieced together from pre-existing religions. As an example of a religion that reflects a cluelessness of the universe's layout, we can look to the ancient Greek explanation of the sun's apparent movement, that the sun god Helios is pulling it across the sky from his fiery chariot. But of course we know the sun is not moving across the sky. It just looks that way because the earth is turning on its axis, and the architect of the universe would know this. So this is a strong clue that the author of this story and the architect of the universe are not one and the same. Now, we could certainly say that the author of the Greek myth was clever and creative, but nonetheless 100% human. I'll just give one more example of a creative creation story that I like. This one's from Kenya, and it's a tale that explains why the sun and the moon have different degrees of brightness and why they're seen at different times of the day. And this is a book from a book called African Mythology. God created the moon first and then the sun. The moon was bigger and brighter, and the envious sun attacked his elder brother. As they wrestled, the moon was thrown in the mud. Dirt splashed over him, and he was no longer so bright. Their fight became tiresome to God, so he decided to eternally separate them. You, he commanded the sun, shine only during the day. And you, he commanded the moon, shine only at night. Now, in my book, I give several more examples, but for this video, I'm just going to jump to the bottom line conclusion, which is that when these non-Christian religious stories contain inaccurate and earthbound descriptions of the universe, things like the stars are tiny, the earth is flat, the moon shines its own light, sun revolves around the earth, these are strong clues that a religion's stories weren't authorized by the universe's architect. Maybe not 100% proof, but nonetheless a strong clue. All right, next category in our review of non-Christian religions is looking for barbaric laws, including those that reflect senseless prejudices. And probably the most famous example is Hinduism's caste system. The allegedly holy Hindu scriptures tell us that because all castes were created by the Hindu god Purusha, your function in life depended on what part of his body you came from. Scriptures tell us that from his mouth came the priestly class, from his arms came the ruling warrior class, from his thighs came the farmers and herders, and from his feet came the servants, and the servants were born to serve the top three castes. Now those in the bottom caste are warned by the gods that they need to mind their manners around the upper gods. I'm going to read a passage here from Manusmriti 8, verses 270 through 272. If a man of one birth, that is the Sudra, the bottom caste, hurls cruel words at any of the twice-born, that's any of the upper three castes, his tongue should be cut out, for he was born from the rear end. If he mentions their name or caste maliciously, a red-hot iron nail 10 fingers long should be thrust into his mouth. If he is so proud as to instruct priests about their duty, the king should have hot oil poured into the Sudra's mouth and ears. Now, below the servants are those that Purusha did not create, the untouchables. And the untouchables are considered so lowly that even if just their shadow touches an upper caste, the upper caste has to go through a repurification ceremony. And should an untouchable dare to touch an upper caste, divine law has it that they should be killed. Here's a passage from Vishnusmriti 5, verses 104 and 105. If one who must not be touched intentionally defiles by his touch one who may be touched, he shall be put to death. But if we ever did any kind of scientific study to search for differences between Indians of different castes, any comparisons for biological or psychological or intellectual differences, we would find that there weren't any. We'd find that there is no rational justification for the caste system. So again, if we're going to accept the premise that one religion is from God, the rest are just made up by people. This irrational and cruel prejudice that's inherent in Hinduism is a strong clue that Hinduism falls into the made by man category. Now, the last strong clue that a religion comes from man rather than God is when we can trace much of a religion's origins back to pre-existing religions. An example, we can look at voodoo, which was created in Haiti in the 17 and 1800s. So when the Catholic missionaries arrived to convert the Haitian slaves that had come from Africa, what the slaves did was take certain aspects of Catholicism, the candles and crosses and bells and baptism, and they combined these with traditional African religious practices, such as rituals involving drumming and dancing and ancestor worship. Another example is Sikhism, which was pieced together in the 1500s by combining bits and pieces of some of that 4,000 or so year old Hinduism and some of the then 900-year-old Islam. Yet if we're going to accept the premise that there's an almighty and beyond brilliant creator of the universe, and that one religion came from this brilliant God, and the rest were just made up by people, it seems highly unlikely that such a creator would operate by this sloppy method of dictating half accurate and half inaccurate holy messages to different parts of the globe in different millenniums, and then take centuries before joining the jigsaw puzzle pieces together. And most Christian proselytizers will agree, looking at these non-Christian religions, that this makes no sense. All right, so to summarize, when a religion reveals a cluelessness about the universe's design, includes laws that are barbaric and involve senseless prejudices, and the religion shows clear signs of religious borrowing, these are all clues that strongly suggest a religion was not handed down to us by God, but only created by the human imagination. So, in the next video, the Christian and I will read through the Judeo-Christian Bible and examine it by the same light that we just held up to non-Christian religions. And this is where the conflict in my book and in this video series really starts.